The road to Aramore Fortress had always carried an unusual quiet to it. Not the empty silence of an abandoned place, but the kind of gentle hush that settles over old landscapes. When time moves more slowly than it should, you notice it first as the path narrows beneath the overhanging pines, their dark needles whispering softly under the breath of a cold northern wind. The late evening light falls across the stones in thin gold streaks, each one growing longer as the sun drifts toward the horizon. Even though the day is fading, the air holds a calm grayness, as if the world is preparing itself for a night of careful listening. Your steps sound strangely distant. Every footfall lands on the old stones with a muted thud, echoing just far enough to remind you that you are alone, but not far enough to feel unwelcome. It is the type of quiet that feels lived in, softened by centuries of travelers who walked this road before you, their voices long faded into the hills. Ahead, the silhouette of Aramore Fortress rises from the ridgeline. At first it looks like nothing more than a dark, uneven outline against the cobalt sky, but as you walk closer, the details begin to emerge. The tall western tower with its weathered battlements, the slanted roof of the old barracks, the long curtain wall draped in creeping ivy, and, most striking of all, the bell tower. It rises above the rest of the fortress, a narrow stone shaft carved from pale granite, its upper windows open to the sky like silent, watching eyes. The bell itself is not visible from this distance, but you know it is there, a massive, iron-cast relic forged centuries ago. For reasons you can't explain, you've always been drawn to that tower, not because of the stories, not because of the rumors whispered by travelers seeking warmth in roadside inns, but because something about that place feels unfinished, as if a single thread of history was left hanging in the air, waiting for someone to pick it up again. Your pace slows as you reach the final bend in the road. Here the path widens, flattening into a stretch of worn stone slabs that lead straight to the fortress gate. The sky deepens into shades of blue and violet, the light dimming into a soft half-darkness. Owls begin their nightly calls from the forest behind you, each hoot echoing gently through the pines. A faint mist drifts up from the lower valley, curling around your ankles, wrapping the ground in a soft blanket of pale silver. The fortress walls loom above the haze, their stones glowing faintly in the fading twilight. You pause, taking in the full shape of Aramore. The fortress is old, far older than most buildings that stand in this region. Some say it was razed during the early border wars. Others claim it was built atop an even older structure, its foundations resting on forgotten ruins. Whatever the truth, the walls carry marks of age and memory, faint carvings worn nearly smooth, mortar faded to powder, ivy roots gripping deep into the cracks. Yet despite all this, Aramore does not feel abandoned. Lantern holders still line the walls, their metal frames rusted but intact. Wooden beams protrude from the battlements like the ribs of an ancient ship. And somewhere within the stone corridors, you sense movement, not loud or threatening, but subtle, the type of presence that belongs to a place long tended, long guarded. You inhale slowly, letting the cool air fill your lungs. A soft hum reaches your ears, barely audible above the whisper of the wind. A sound like a low vibration, as if something heavy is gently trembling in the distance. It lasts only a moment, then fades into the dusk. You glance toward the bell tower. For an instant, you think you see something, a faint glow behind one of the upper windows, like the last embers of a lantern swinging slowly in the dark. But when you blink, the light is gone. The path leads you directly to the fortress gate, a tall wooden door reinforced with blackened iron bands. Its surface is marked with the grooves of time, but the hinges look surprisingly well kept, as if someone still oils them. You raise a hand toward the handle, then pause as a soft breeze drifts past your ear, carries with it a faint sound, something delicate, distant, and unmistakably metallic. A single chime, not loud, not forceful, more like the bell exhaling a whisper into the night. You turn toward the tower. The windows remain still. No light flickers inside. No movement crosses the stone openings. Just the deepening quiet of twilight settling over the fortress. You rest your hand on the cold wood of the gate and push gently. It swings inward without resistance, opening onto the quiet courtyard within. You step through, and the air shifts, warmer here, as if the fortress has been holding its breath, waiting. A soft echo drifts down the inner corridor. Not footsteps, not voices, a gentle tap, a rhythmic, measured sound, as if someone is walking slowly, with a pace timed to something you cannot yet hear. You glance once more at the bell tower. The story begins here, not with fear, not with danger, but with the quiet invitation of a place that has waited far too long for someone to listen. And as the last threads of daylight fade from the sky, you step deeper into Aramore Fortress, where the silent bell ringer keeps his lonely vigil over secrets that refuse to sleep. The courtyard at twilight. The gate closes behind you with a low, wooden sigh. Not a slam, not a jolt, just a slow, reluctant settling of old hinges, as if the fortress is adjusting its weight around you. You stand just inside the entrance passage, waiting for your eyes to adjust to the softer light. The corridor is broad enough for two riders to pass side by side, its ceiling arched overhead in smooth stone ribs. Narrow arrow slits run along the walls at shoulder height, admitting thin bands of twilight that stretch across the floor like faded scars. The air is cooler here than on the open road, holding a faint chill that smells of stone, metal, and the ghost of extinguished smoke. You take a few slow steps forward. Your footsteps echo against the walls, rippling outward in soft, overlapping waves. The fortress does not answer with creaks or groans. It simply listens. At the end of the entrance passage, the space opens abruptly into the main courtyard. You step out into it and pause. The courtyard is larger than you expected. A wide, roughly rectangular space enclosed by walls and buildings on all sides. On your left, a long, low structure with a slanted roof leans slightly inward. The old barracks from the look of it. Directly ahead, a broader building with heavy doors and narrow windows. Must once have been the Great Hall. To your right, a row of smaller rooms stretches along the wall, their doors ajar or missing, like quiet mouths left open in surprise. And rising above everything, off to the far corner, stands the bell tower. From here you can see more of its structure, for angular buttresses brace it at its base, anchoring it to the fortress wall. The stone of the tower is lighter than the rest of Aramore, as though it was carved from a different quarry entirely, pale granite streaked with faint bands of silver. The uppermost openings are still dark. No light moves within them, no rope hangs down, but as you look up, you feel an odd sensation, as if the tower is looking back. Not in a menacing way, not like an eye, but more like an old man leaning on his cane, watchful and patient, accustomed to standing guard while others sleep. You let your attention drift back down into the courtyard itself. Weeds have sprung up between the stone flags, not wild and overgrown, but sparse, their thin stems nodding gently in the evening breeze. A few fallen leaves lie in small drifts along the walls, caught in the angles where stone meets stone. In the center of the courtyard, there is a circular patch where the flagstones give way to earth. Once it might have held a tree or a well. Now it holds only packed soil, a shallow depression filled with mist that curls and uncurls like breath. The fortress is undeniably old, but it doesn't feel deserted. Not quite. You walk a slow circle around the courtyard, letting your fingertips brush the rough stone of the inner walls. Here and there, you find traces of the people who once lived here. A broken wooden bucket leaning near the barracks wall, its metal band rusted but intact. A patch of soot near a doorway, where torches must have burned night after night. Faint scratches near the lower stones, initials perhaps, or the beginnings of small carvings left unfinished. At one corner, near a set of shallow steps leading up to a covered walkway, Your boot nudges something that skitters lightly across the ground. You stop and look down. A small metal object lies half hidden in the dust. You crouch and pick it up. It's a bell clapper. Not full-sized. Not the massive iron core of a great tower bell, but small, shaped to fit inside a handbell or a signal bell. The metal has darkened with age, but the surface is surprisingly smooth, worn down by countless swings, countless impacts. You roll it gently between your fingers. Even without the bell around it, you can almost hear the sound it once made. A clear, bright chime cutting through cold air, calling soldiers to formation, announcing arrivals at the gate, marking the passing of the hours. You close your hand around it. The clapper is cool to the touch. Cool, but not entirely cold. As if it has been handled recently. You straighten slowly, scanning the courtyard again. No one moves. No voices speak. The only sound is the faint, distant sigh of wind, threading its way through the tower windows above. A thought settles quietly in your mind. If the fortress is truly abandoned, why does the road to it still feel walked? Why do the hinges on the gate still turn so smoothly? And why does a piece of the bell's heart feel as though it remembers being held? You slip the small clapper into your pocket, more out of instinct than decision. The sky above darkens by another shade of blue. The first stars appear, pale and cautious at the edges of the horizon. A chill moves through the courtyard, soft and even, like a blanket being laid over the stones. You draw your cloak closer around your shoulders. That's when you hear it again. Not loud, not close, just at the edge of perception. A deep, distant tone that seems to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the air instead of piercing it. A bell, but not fully rung. More like a bell being nudged in its sleep, given just enough movement to stir, but not enough to wake. The sound rolls through you in a low, resonant wave. Your chest tightens, then relaxes. It is not an alarming sound. If anything, it feels oddly comforting, like the memory of being called inside as a child. When night began to gather over the fields, you glance up at the tower again. The windows remain dark. The sound fades into the quiet. For a long moment you stand still, listening to the empty air, half expecting the bell to speak again. It doesn't. Instead, a different sound reaches you from somewhere deeper within the fortress. Faint, measured tapping. Soft, steady, almost polite, like knuckles rapping gently on a wooden door. Tap, 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 3 times. Then silence. You turn toward the source. It seems to come from a narrow passageway on the far side of the courtyard, where a low arch opens into shadow. From where you stand, you can see only the first few stones of the corridor beyond, washed in a weak gray light. The rest is swallowed by darkness. You feel no surge of dread, no instinct telling you to run. Instead, you feel something else, a kind of quiet curiosity, almost like being invited. You take a slow breath. The fortress has waited a long time, the stones holding stories like a book that no one opens. If there is someone still walking its corridors, you have come this far to meet them. You step toward the archway. As you cross the center of the courtyard, you pass once more by the shallow circle of earth in the middle. The mist there curls around your ankles, cool and damp, then disperses with your movement. For the briefest moment, you think you see the imprint of footprints in the dirt. Not your own, not fresh, but overlapping one another in layers, as though many people once stood in that spot, gathered around some unseen focal point. Then the breeze shifts, the mist moves, and the shapes blur back into formlessness. You continue walking. When you reach the archway, you pause and rest your hand on the stone. Feel solid, steady, quietly warm from having held the day's light before the sun sank. You peer into the passage. The tapping does not repeat. The darkness ahead is soft, not harsh, open to your presence, not opposed to it. You step through the arch, leaving the open sky behind you. The story of Aramor is waiting in the halls ahead, woven into stone and shadow, and somewhere above, In the highest part of the fortress, a silent bell remembers the hands that once rang it. Tonight, those hands may not be as distant as history would suggest. You walk forward, and the twilight closes gently at your back. The Hall of Portraits. The passage beyond the archway is narrow at first, barely wide enough for you to walk without brushing against the walls. The air is cooler here, quietly settling around you like a cloak pulled gently over your shoulders. Only a faint sliver of twilight reaches this corridor, its blue-gray glow stretching along the stones in a thin ribbon. Your footsteps echo differently in this space. Not the wide, open resonance of the courtyard, but a soft, close sound that folds back on itself, as though the walls are listening closely. After several paces, your hand drifts along the stone surface beside you, feeling the faint texture of chisel marks worn down by time. The fortress was clearly built to endure, but the people who shaped it left behind small traces of their craftsmanship. Marks that speak of work done in patience, in cold mornings and long evenings, in quiet determination. The corridor widens gradually, the ceiling lifts, and the shadows ease into a softer, more welcoming darkness. You step into a larger chamber. Takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. The room is rectangular, its walls rising high on either side, the ceiling forming a subtle arch overhead. No torches burn here, yet the space is not fully dark. A faint silvery glow drifts in from narrow windows placed high along the back wall, letting the night filter through in fractured shafts. You take another step, and something glints faintly to your right. Frames. Portraits. An entire wall lined with them. You move closer slowly, your breath softening on instinct. The frames vary in size, some large and imposing, others small and delicate, their wood darkened by centuries of settling dust. Most of the portraits are obscured. The paint has faded. The faces have blurred. Time has softened the edges until only vague impressions remain. A curve of a shoulder, the pale arc of a collar, the suggestion of a watchful eye. But the atmosphere is not eerie. If anything, it feels like a quiet gallery, a place preserved not to intimidate, but to remember. You stand before the first portrait. Only the outline of the figure remains. A tall silhouette, a cloak draped over one shoulder, a sword hilt barely visible. The second portrait is clearer. A woman with long, braided hair, her expression soft and steady, as though she is gazing past the painter, toward something unseen. The third portrait is almost intact. A young man, barely older than a boy, dressed in a uniform bearing the crest of Aramor, a stylized bell crossed with a simple shield. You notice something else. Nearly every portrait, even the most faded ones, shares a single common feature. Each figure is turned slightly to the left, not facing forward, not angled sharply, just a subtle, habitual tilt, as if every person painted here was glancing toward some unseen presence in the room. You follow their gaze. It leads to the far corner of the hall, a darker area where the light from the high windows doesn't quite reach. There is something there, a shape, a large frame, covered entirely by a heavy cloth. You walk toward it slowly. As you cross the room, the air seems to thicken slightly, not oppressive, but heavier with meaning, like walking toward an unopened chapter of a book you didn't realize you wanted to read. When you reach the covered frame, you rest your hand on the cloth. The fabric is old but intact, a deep wine-red color, faded in places, but still strong. You hesitate for a moment, not out of fear, but respect. You pinch the cloth between your fingers and pull it gently aside. Dust rises in a soft cloud, sparkling briefly in the thin silver light. The portrait beneath is revealed. Slowly, like an image surfacing from deep water, a man stands in the painting, tall, lean, his posture straight. He is dressed in the old uniform of the fortress, similar to the boy in the earlier portrait, but more elaborate. A dark coat with silver fastenings, a sash draped across his chest, a pair of gloves held loosely in one hand. But what draws your eye immediately is the object in his other hand, a bell rope, thin and worn, its fibers depicted with exquisite detail. It hangs down from his grip, disappearing off the bottom edge of the canvas. The man's face is clearer than the others, calm, somber, eyes slightly shadowed, hair tied back at the nape, a faint crease at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, but something like quiet endurance. And like every other figure in this hall, he is turned slightly to the left, toward the bell tower. You step back a little, taking in the whole frame. This must be him, the bell ringer of Aramore, the man whose story you came here to find, or perhaps the man whose story came to find you. You lean closer. There is an inscription beneath the frame, barely legible, the carved letters worn shallow over time. You trace them with your fingertips, feeling the grooves under your skin. Captain Aranford Hale, Keeper of the Hours. The title sends a strange warmth through your chest, not fear, but recognition, as if the fortress itself has been waiting for someone to read that name aloud. A soft breeze slips through the high windows, rustling the edges of the uncovered cloth behind you. The sound travels down the hall in a whispering sigh, curling around the portraits, stirring the dust motes in gentle spirals. The silence deepens. Then, somewhere far above, something moves, a sound so soft, so subtle, that at first you mistake it for your own heartbeat. A faint metallic tremble, not a full bell chime, just the smallest shift, like a heavy object settling. After being still for too long, you look up toward the ceiling. The bell tower rises somewhere beyond the walls, connected to this hall through unseen passageways and stone routes. For a moment, you feel as though the fortress is inhaling, filling its lungs with the night air before deciding whether to speak again. The portraits watch you, or rather, they watch the place where the bellringer's tower stands, as if waiting for something that hasn't happened in years. You take one more look at Captain Aranford Hale's painting, at the quiet strength in his gaze, the patience in his stance, the bell rope held like a promise. Then you let the cloth fall softly back over the frame. The room exhales with you. You turn toward the doorway at the opposite end of the hall. Deeper in the fortress, the tapping sound echoes again. Soft, measured, patient. Not a warning, not a threat, an invitation. You take a step toward it, then another. The bellringer's story has waited a long time. Tonight, you walk forward to meet it. The upper walkway. The doorway at the far end of the portrait hall opens into a narrow stairwell, a spiraling ascent of worn stone steps that twist upward along the inside of the fortress wall. The air here is cooler, colder in a way that suggests the stairwell rarely sees the warmth of day. Your footsteps land quietly, each step softened by time, and the countless feet that must have climbed this path long before you did. The walls curve around you in smooth arcs, decorated only by the faint outlines of what might once have been torch brackets. Most are empty now, just shallow metal rings rusted into the stone. A few, however, still hold the remnants of old torches, their wooden shafts brittle and gray, as if touched by frost. As you ascend, the faint tapping sound you heard earlier becomes more distinct. Not louder, just clearer, steady, measured, a rhythm without urgency, like a craftsman working with slow patience, or a caretaker tending to something delicate. You pause on the steps, listening. Tap, 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 comes from above, from the level of the upper walkway, from somewhere near the base of the tower, where the narrow passages converge. You continue upward. The stairs eventually open into a long stone walkway that runs along the inner side of the fortress wall. From here, you can see the courtyard below, dimly illuminated by the last traces of twilight. The mist has settled more heavily around the central patch of earth, its silvery swirls lit gently by the glow of the higher stars. The walkway itself is roofed by wooden beams, but open to the courtyard on one side. Each gap in the stone railing frames part of the scene below like a still painting. Mist drifting across the earth, ivy swaying gently against the walls, shadows stretching from one corner to another. The air is cool, but not biting. A calm night wrapped in the sound of wind and stillness. You walk along the railing, your fingers brushing over the cold stone. The walkway creaks in some places, the old wood beneath your boots sinking slightly, but it feels stable, cared for in a way that contradicts the fortress's age. As you reach the midpoint of the walkway, you notice something unexpected, a lantern, not lit, but intact. It hangs from an iron hook mounted on the wall, this frame simple and unadorned, crafted of dark metal that has resisted rust better than anything else in this place. The glass panes inside are dusty, but not shattered. The wick looks as though it was trimmed recently. You reach out, touching the lantern gently. The metal is cool, but not entirely cold. A soft warmth lingers in the iron, faint but unmistakable, as though someone held it, perhaps only hours ago. You withdraw your hand slowly. The walkway stretches ahead of you, leading toward a short flight of steps that rise to the tower's entry arch. The tapping is louder now, still soft, still rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. Your heart does not race. Your breathing remains steady. This place doesn't feel threatening. More like someone is moving through a routine they know well, a rhythm they've kept for years, maybe centuries. You climb the steps. At the landing, the tower's lower door stands ajar. A low arch carved with faint symbols curves above it, weathered lines forming the shapes of bells, ropes, and a single five-pointed star. The door itself is made from thick planks, reinforced by horizontal iron bands. It is far too heavy to have swung open on its own. And yet, there it stands, slightly open, as if someone slipped through only moments before. You place your hand on the edge of the door, feeling the rough wood beneath your palm. It moves easily under your touch. Quietly, almost gratefully, the door swings open and reveals a circular chamber, the base of the bell tower. You step inside. The room is dim, lit only by a thin ribbon of moonlight pouring down from the spiral staircase that winds upward along the wall. Dust lies thick in some corners, but the center of the chamber is remarkably clear, as though someone walks through it regularly. And then you see it, a rope, hanging from a wooden beam above, its fibers frayed but intact. The end of the rope has been tied neatly. It's not worn smooth from hands that have gripped it countless times. And just beside it, resting on a small stone ledge, lies a metal object. You move closer. Another clapper, larger than the one in your pocket. Darker. Its surface bears faint scratches, as though it struck iron again and again. For years beyond memory. You pick it up. Warm. Not hot, but warm enough that someone touched it recently. You look around the chamber. No one stands in the shadows. No sound stirs in the corners. Only the rope sways gently, just a hint, barely perceptible, the kind of movement that could be caused by a faint breeze, or a hand letting go, just moments before you arrived. Tap. The sound comes from above. Just one tap, single, clear, distinct in the still air, not echoing, not vibrating, a solitary metallic sound, as though something brushed against the bell higher in the tower. You lift your eyes to the spiral staircase. The shadows between the steps pulse with faint movement, like light shifting behind a thin curtain. Then you notice something on the lowest step. It's small, barely visible, but as you step closer, you recognize it, a footprint. Not heavy, not deep, just a faint impression in the dust. Shaped like a bare foot, long, narrow, human. You follow the next one, and the next, each print spaced evenly apart, leading upward, toward the higher levels, toward the bell. You touch the stone railing, feeling the coolness of it against your fingertips. The fortress is not hostile, not haunted in the fearful sense, but it is inhabited by a presence that moves with quiet purpose, presence that pulls you forward, a presence tied to the rhythm of the bell, and the silent duty of ringing it. You take a slow, steady breath. The footprints climb. And now, so do you. The spiral ascent. The first step of the spiral staircase feels colder than the floor below, not icy or unpleasant, just touched by a deeper stillness, as though the higher parts of the tower have been waiting longer than the halls you've already crossed. Your hand brushes the smooth rail carved into the inner curve of the wall. The stone beneath your fingertips is worn in a way that tells a story all on its own. Countless hands once climbed the same path, some hurried, some solemn, some carrying news, others carrying the weight of duty. You place your foot on the next step. The dust shifts slightly, leaving the shape of your heel beside a much older print. The faint bare footprint you saw on the lower step, its edges blurred with age, or something older than age. You follow them upward. The staircase curves tightly, its narrow window slits allowing slivers of moonlight to spill across the steps in soft crescents. Each window frames a fragment of the night sky, a star here, the edge of a drifting cloud there, and somewhere far below, the courtyard's pale mist swirling gently like a breathing thing. As you rise, the tapping sound returns. Tap, tap, tap. It does not echo. It does not hurry. It does not grow sharper. Instead, it drifts down the staircase in soft waves, as though someone is working patiently on something delicate. You pause on the steps, listening. The rhythm is unmistakable, measured, steady, almost soothing. A rhythm that suggests not work, but ritual. You ascend again. Halfway up the first rotation of the staircase, you notice marks on the inner wall, small, shallow indentations, each spaced exactly the width of a hand apart. You press your fingers against one of them. It fits. The marks continue upward in a line, like steps of a ladder carved into the stone. Not decoration, not damage, something intentional, as if someone climbed here before the staircase even existed. A breeze brushes past your ear, carries the faint scent of cold iron, and something else, the dry, distant smell of rope fibers, rubbed smooth by years of use. You place your foot on the next step, and feel a faint vibration beneath it. It lasts only a second, just long enough to feel like the tower breathing. You keep climbing. With each step, the chamber below grows quieter, and the world narrows into the curve of the staircase. Stone beneath your hand, moonlight slicing across the path, and the quiet tapping drifting down in a steady pulse. Tap, tap, tap. Your heart does not race. The sound is not alarming. If anything, its consistency becomes rhythmic enough to fall in sync with your breathing. You turn another curve in the staircase, and the tapping stops. Silence flows down like water spilling into the stairwell. Not abrupt, not ominous, just silence. You reach the next window slit on your left. This one opens toward the north, overlooking the dark hills beyond Aramore. The wind slips through the narrow gap, carrying with it the gentle hum of distant night insects, and the faint rustling of trees far below. You linger there for a moment, letting the breeze cool your skin, feeling the calm weight of the fortress around you. Above, you hear something else, a whisper, not a voice, not words, just a shift in the air, like fabric brushing lightly against stone. You look up the staircase. The dust on the steps above shows more footprints, not fresh, not heavy, but clear enough to guide you. They ascend evenly, as if someone climbed with a practiced, fluid stride, their bare feet touching only the center of each step. You take a slow breath and continue. The atmosphere grows softer as you climb, more still, more focused, as though the tower is guiding you up, the way one might guide a candle flame. Between cupped hands, you pass an alcove carved into the outer wall. Inside it rests a small brass bowl filled with dried herbs, lavender from the look of it, and perhaps remnants of rose petals faded to pale gray. You brush the edge of the bowl with your fingertips. A faint aroma rises, unexpectedly fresh, as though the herbs have been tended recently. Your chest softens with a quiet warmth. This place was not abandoned. In the emotional sense, someone once loved this tower enough to leave small comforts tucked into its walls. You climb higher. Your foot lands on a slightly uneven step, and your fingertips steady you against the wall. As your hand presses the stone, you feel something engraved beneath your skin. You shift to see it clearly. Letters, carved deep, weathered smooth, barely visible in the dim light. You tilt your head to read them. He keeps the hours so others may rest. You trace the carving slowly. The words feel familiar, like the echo of a voice you've never heard, but somehow recognize. You remember the inscription on Captain Hale's portrait. Keeper of the Hours. Title, a duty, a burden. The tapping resumes above you. Not louder, but closer. You follow the sound upward. The air grows cooler once more, but not in a way that chills. More like the quiet that settles in a chapel. Just before dawn, you reach another window slit, this one angled toward the inner courtyard. Below, the mist moves slowly, shaped by the subtle currents of the night breeze. It curls around the stone circle in the courtyard's center, forming gentle loops, as though drawn to that place by habit. You continue the ascent. Halfway up the final curve of the staircase, you notice something on the steps. A small object. You crouch and pick it up. A button. Simple. Worn. Carved from bone. Its surface smoothed by time and handling. You turn it between your fingers. There's nothing remarkable about its shape, yet something about it feels quietly personal. An object someone kept close, perhaps on a sleeve or near the cuff of a uniform. You slip it into your pocket beside the smaller bell clapper. Above you, the tapping stops again. Silence settles with soft precision. You reach the top of the staircase. Here, the passage opens into a small landing. Lit by a single rectangular window, the moonlight casts pale lines across the stone floor, revealing two doors. One to the left, heavy, reinforced, likely leading out to the ramparts. One to the right, slightly open, revealing only a sliver of darkness within. The tapping had come from behind the door on the right. You step closer. The air beyond it feels still, quiet in a watchful way, like a room that has waited so long. Its memories have fallen asleep. You place your hand on the door. It moves gently beneath your touch. Quiet hinges, steady wood. Someone has cared for it. You inhale, calm and slow. This is not the moment of confrontation. It is the moment of invitation. You push the door open, letting the soft darkness inside unfold like a curtain. And as you step through, the tower breathes with you. The bell room. The door opens with a slow, weighted ease, as though the wood has memorized the exact pressure needed to welcome you inside without protest. The chamber beyond is larger than you expect, far larger than the narrow staircase and quiet landing suggest. It forms a full circle, its stone walls curving around you like the interior of a vast shell. High above, the ceiling arches into a pointed dome, interrupted only by the thick beams that support the tower's uppermost levels. And in the center, suspended on a heavy wooden frame, hangs the bell. You take a few soft steps forward. Your breath settles, your heartbeat slows. The bell is magnificent, far more intricate than anything else in Aramore Fortress. Forged from dark iron with a faint bluish sheen, its broad surface is etched with patterns so old. The meaning has long since dissolved into myth. Circular etchings spiral outward from the center, like ripples in deep water. Lines curve upward into symbols shaped like stars, leaves, and faint silhouettes of hands reaching gently toward the sky. And there, wrapped around the lower rim, a single line of text runs in a near-perfect ring. The letters are worn, but still readable. May the hours be held in peace, so no soul must carry them alone. You step closer, feeling the quiet weight of the words settle around you like soft cloth. The bell doesn't dominate the room, in an imposing or frightening way. Instead, it seems patient, a guardian that has stood in stillness for so long. It has become a part of the night itself. You circle it slowly. The wooden frame creaks gently under your movement, but the bell remains motionless, its iron body steady, as though anchored not just by the ropes and beams, but by time itself. As you complete half a circle, you see something on the far side of the room. A rope, long, frayed at the end, hanging from a pulley system connected to the bell's inner clapper. The rope rests on the floor in a loose coil, its fibers worn smooth, not by neglect, but by use. And beside the rope, resting carefully on a small stone pedestal, is an object that makes your breath pause. A lantern, not an old, broken one like the others scattered around the fortress. This one is in perfect condition. This metal frame polished. This glass panes clean. A small wick sits inside, trimmed neatly. You reach out and touch the lantern lightly. Warm, faintly warm, as if someone held it moments before you entered. You withdraw your hand slowly, your fingers tingling with a quiet recognition. You follow the curve of the room further. The stone floor here bears marks, smooth grooves worn into arcs, suggesting the repetitive movement of someone pacing gently, back and forth. Over years, a soft vibration hums through the air, barely perceptible. You stand still and listen. There, at the very edge of hearing, a faint sound, a breath, not yours, not a whisper, not a word, just a presence. A soft exhale of someone accustomed to silence. You turn toward the source instinctively, but find nothing visible. Only empty space, gentle moonlight, and the lingering warmth of the lantern. You walk toward the bell again, this time standing directly beneath the great iron curve. The air feels different here, heavier, yet calm. A low resonance hums through your chest, like the echo of a chime that hasn't sounded in centuries, but still remembers how to vibrate. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sensation settle. When you open them, you catch a small movement at the edge of your vision. Flicker, like a reflection, across the bell's polished surface. You step forward slowly. The reflection appears again, this time clearer. A silhouette, tall, still, standing near the wall opposite you, just beyond the edge of the moonlight. You blink once, and the silhouette shifts its head, not toward you, but toward the bell. A quiet, gentle gesture, with no urgency, no hostility, no fear, just purpose. A presence fulfilling a duty it has kept for longer than memory. Your breath steadies. The silhouette grows clearer. The faint outline of a uniform, a cloak falling across the shoulders, a rope held loosely in one hand. The bell ringer, Captain Aaronford Hale. His form does not glow. It does not flicker. It does not burn with cold fire, or distort like smoke. He stands as though made of soft moonlight, pale and quiet, his edges blending seamlessly with the darkness behind him. You don't move. You don't need to. The air shifts around him, a soft ripple, like the movement of a hand brushing aside a curtain. He steps forward, slowly, deliberately, calmly. His bare footsteps make no sound against the stone. He walks to the rope, and rests his hand on it with a familiar, almost tender certainty. The rope moves slightly under his touch, its fibers creaking in recognition. He does not look at you, not yet. Instead, he lifts the rope gently, and then lets it fall. Not enough to ring the bell, just enough to stir it. A soft tremor flows through the air. The bell exhales a faint note, more breath than sound, a vibration so low, it settles in your bones. Captain Hale lowers his hand, and turns his head just slightly, his gaze brushing past you, in a gesture that feels like acknowledgement, or perhaps recognition. A soft breeze shifts the fringes of his cloak. A fragment of his voice drifts into the air. Not a word, not a whisper, but the soft echo of someone who has been silent too long. He looks toward the window. The moonlight glows across his profile, gentle and serene. You stand still. The bell room holds its breath. And then, only for a moment, he looks at you. His expression is not sorrowful, not angry, not fearful. It is calm, deeply calm, as though he is relieved. Not that you have found him, but that someone has finally come to listen. The rope shifts under his hand. The bell sways a fraction of an inch, and with a soft exhale of sound, the tower speaks again. a gentle, incomplete chime, warm, resonant, peaceful, like a greeting, like a beginning, the bell ringer's vigil. For a long moment, the only sound in the bell room is the faint vibration. Still lingering in the iron curve of the bell, it hums gently, resonating through the stones, like the heartbeat of the tower itself. Captain Hale does not speak. His presence is steady, unhurried, neither beckoning nor warning, simply being, as though the room has been waiting centuries. To return to this quiet equilibrium, you feel no fear, only a sense of profound calm, like entering a place where time moves differently, and every sound is softened by the weight of history. The bell ringer rests one hand lightly on the rope, his fingers curled around the worn fibers, with a tenderness that speaks of habit, duty, and long years spent in silence. The lantern beside him flickers, not with flame, there is no flame, but with a subtle shift of warmth, as if reacting to his presence, acknowledging him the way a candle acknowledges a passing breeze. You step closer, moving with the same slow stillness as the air around you. Captain Hale shifts his gaze just a fraction, his eyes following the arc of moonlight across the floor. Rather than meeting your OWN.IT is not avoidance. It is habit, the habit of someone who spent his life watching the hours, the shadows, and the subtle movements of the world, rather than the faces around him. He releases the rope and lets his hand fall softly to his side. You watch as the rope sways, barely perceptible, its motion gradually slowing, like the pendulum of a clock returning to stillness. The silence that follows is deep and gentle. Then, a sound, soft, low, rhythmic, not the tapping from earlier, but something quieter, the sound of breath, not from you, from him. You barely notice at first. It is so soft, so woven into the fabric of the room, but slowly, you become aware of the faintest exhale, a steady, patient pattern, as if Captain Hale is breathing in time. With the fortress itself, his form is clearer now, more defined. The edges of his silhouette sharpen in the moonlight, showing details you didn't notice before. The faint stitching along his coat's collar, a small tear at the sleeve, carefully mended by hand, the outline of a clasp at his shoulder, bearing the shape of a bell, not ornamental, symbolic. You take a small breath and decide to speak. Your voice is quiet, gentle, the kind of tone one uses inside a sanctuary. Were you the bell ringer here? The question barely leaves your lips, before it seems to dissolve into the room, absorbed by the soft resonance in the air. Captain Hale does not respond immediately. He remains still, his head turned slightly toward the window, as though listening to something only he can hear. Seconds pass, or perhaps minutes. Time feels fluid here. Finally, he shifts. His gaze lowers to the floor, then lifts slowly toward the great bell, and for a moment, his form brightens, only faintly, like moonlight catching on glass. When he turns toward you, you see something in his expression, a softness, acknowledgement, and something like tired gratitude. He raises his hand, not toward you, but toward the bell. His palm hovers near the iron surface, fingers spread gently, as if showing you what his voice cannot express. You follow his gesture. The bell's surface carries faint marks, small indentations, barely visible etchings, signs of something heavy pressing against it, over and over, for countless nights. Captain Hale lowers his hand again. He steps back slightly, adjusting his posture, with the slow deliberation of someone accustomed to long, patient vigils. You sense it even before the realization forms fully. He is not here to frighten. He is not here to haunt. He is here to keep watch, just as he did in life, just as he does now, a guardian of hours and quiet transitions, someone who rings the bell, not to alarm the living, but to mark the passing of time. For those who can no longer do it themselves, the lantern beside him glows faintly again, its warmth brushing against your skin. like the soft touch of a familiar hand. You lower your gaze to the rope. Something catches your eye. A second set of prints. Very faint, smaller than Captain Hale's, clinging to the dust near the edge of the room. Not new, but not ancient either. You kneel to look closer. The bell ringer does not react. He simply watches, his presence steady and patient. As the moon arcs higher, a story lies here, one older than your arrival, one deeper than the portraits below. When you rise, Captain Hale has turned his gaze back to the bell. The rope sways gently at his side. You feel the shift in the air, a soft stirring, a quiet acknowledgement that you have been accepted into this vigil. He steps back from the rope and moves toward the far side of the room, his form gliding with the ease of someone accustomed to moving without disturbing the world around him. He stops near another doorway, one you hadn't noticed before. It stands partly obscured by shadow, this wooden frame worn but intact, leading downward into some deeper, older part of the fortress. He turns his head slightly, just enough to show he is aware of your presence beside him. Not beckoning, not urging, inviting, the kind of invitation offered by someone who has spent far too long alone, with a story unspoken. You breathe softly, you step forward, and the bell ringer, faithful keeper of Aramoor's quiet hours, waits for you at the threshold of the next chamber, his lantern glow guiding you deeper into the heart of his long vigil. The keeper's chamber. The doorway Captain Hale stands beside is narrow, its stone frame softened by centuries of quiet drafts, and countless evenings of moonlight brushing its edges. A faint scent drifts from the darkness beyond. Not dampness, not decay, but something warm and familiar. Old parchment, wooden shelves, and the faintest trace of burnt oil. A living space, or the memory of one. You step toward the threshold. Captain Hale shifts only slightly, not stepping aside. He does not need to, but adjusting just enough to let you pass, as though he is accustomed to guiding guests, with a gentle, steady presence. Rather than words, you cross the threshold. The air inside is warmer, held close by the stone walls, and a lingering softness that feels as though someone left the room only moments ago. You stand in a small chamber, circular, like the bell room above, but cozier, a place lived in, tended to, carried by routine. Moonlight spills through a narrow window, casting silver light across the room's contents. A wooden table, a chair, a stack of books bound in cracked leather, a folded cloak resting neatly over a stool, a shelf lined with small items, a brass compass, a wooden whistle, a dried sprig of lavender, a pair of gloves folded with precise care. Nothing extravagant, nothing out of place. A room belonging to someone who lived quietly, methodically, and with deep dedication. You move to the table, your footsteps soft against the smooth stone floor. On its surface lies a ledger, its pages yellowed, the ink faded at the edges. You brush your fingertips along the spine, feeling the slight give of worn leather. When you open it, the pages release a faint scent of old ink. The handwriting inside is precise and steady. No flourishes, no hurried lines. Dates run along the margins. Every entry marked with the hour, the wind direction, the condition of the bell rope, and small notes such as hour kept, bell steady, rope inspected at dawn, fray mended, night watch quiet, second lantern lit. Page after page of quiet duty, written with a patience that borders on devotion. Captain Hale stands a short distance behind you, his form steady and still, as though he has stood in that exact spot 1,000 times. While someone leafed through this book, you turn another page. A different kind of entry catches your eye. The ink is slightly darker, as though the writer pressed harder into the page. Footsteps on the upper walkway. Not mine. You pause. Captain Hale does not move. You read the next line. Sounded like a child's pace. No one found. A soft warmth brushes the side of your hand, like the passing of a small breeze. You glance over your shoulder. Captain Hale's gaze is lowered, fixed on the ledger. His expression, though subtle, carries something deeper now. Not sorrow, not fear, memory. You turn another page. More entries follow. Some shorter. Bell rung at second hour. Wind calm. Some longer. Heard tapping again tonight. Soft, steady. Not the bell. Not the rope. You breathe slowly, letting the quiet weight of the words wash over you. This was his world. A life measured in hours, in steady sounds, in soft footfalls that echoed long after the living had gone. You look again at the small items on the shelf. A child's wooden toy soldier, carved crudely, but clearly with affection. A tiny ring, too small for an adult's finger. Silver, engraved with a design worn smooth by time. A folded scrap of parchment. You pick it up gently. Contains a simple drawing. Lines shaky, but earnest. A tall figure holding a lantern. Beside him, a smaller figure holding his hand. Both smiling. The drawing is captioned in a childish scrawl. For you, Captain. Your chest tightens with a quiet, unexpected warmth. You turn toward Captain Hale. He stands completely still, but his presence softens. A shift in the air, as though the room breathes with him. You realize something then. This chamber was not merely a place of duty. It was a place of connection. Someone, a child, had visited him here, had brought him small gifts, had walked the upper walkway, had left footprints you saw earlier, faint but not forgotten. And the tapping, could it have been? You look down at the ledger again. Another entry reads, footsteps returned, light, playful. Bell swayed without touch. Captain Hale moves ever so slightly, his form shifting with the memory. He steps closer to the table, his presence brushing the air beside you. He does not reach for the drawing, but his gaze lingers near it. Not possessive, not mournful, just quietly protective. You lift the drawing once more. The lantern figure, the small hand in his, the simplicity of the happiness captured in those lines. Then you notice something else on the table. A second ledger. Smaller. Bound in a different material. You open it. Only a few lines are written inside. The handwriting is unsteady. Letters large and uneven. Written by a child's hand. Thank you for ringing the bell so I can sleep. Another page. I heard it tonight. I wasn't scared. Another. Will you ring it tomorrow? I like when it echoes. A final page. If I get lost, you will help me find the way. You exhale slowly. The room feels warmer now, not because of heat, but because of understanding. Captain Hale's vigil had never been solitary. He had watched over someone small, someone who trusted him, someone who perhaps still wandered these halls, their light footsteps echoing softly, where the world had forgotten them. You turn to face him fully. His eyes, though pale and distant, hold a depth now, a quiet vulnerability rarely shown by spirits, who linger for duty alone. He does not speak, but he steps aside, revealing another doorway. On the opposite side of the chamber, a doorway leading deeper, into the oldest part of the fortress, a place where echoes live longer, a place where small footsteps might still be heard. You breathe in, steady and calm. Captain Hale does not push you. He simply waits, inviting you to understand the rest of the story, the part he cannot carry alone anymore. You step toward the doorway, and with that gentle motion, the fortress exhales. The lantern glows, and the path ahead opens softly into the next chapter of the bellringer's long vigil. The forgotten corridors. The doorway before you is narrower than the others you have passed through, framed by stones that seem older than the rest of Aramore Fortress. Stones whose edges are rounded, whose surfaces have absorbed centuries of passing hands, and whose silence feels deeper, as though steeped in forgotten footsteps. Moonlight does not reach here. The air is still and dry, smelling faintly of old wood, dust, and something softer, the lingering hint of lavender from the herbs in the bellringer's chamber. as though that scent has followed you, guiding you onward. Captain Hale stands behind you. You do not hear him move, but you feel the shift in the air, the subtle adjustment of presence, as though he has taken one step closer. To ensure you do not enter the darkness alone, you step through the narrow archway. The temperature cools instantly, wrapping around you like the breath of a deep underground cavern. But not unkindly, more like the comfortable chill of a room untouched by daylight. The corridor ahead stretches into shadow, curving slightly to the right, its walls lined with recesses that once held sconces or small shelves. Your footsteps echo softly along the stone, carrying upward into the high, unseen ceiling. The corridor feels taller here, as though the architecture predates the fortress itself, as though this part of Aramor was built upon a foundation that even the bell ringer did not fully understand. You continue with slow, quiet steps. The air shifts again, carrying with it a faint sound. Not tapping, not footsteps, something lighter, brighter, like a tiny chime made of glass. It appears for a moment, then fades, leaving behind a soft hum that blends into the silence so seamlessly. You wonder if you imagined it. You place your hand on the wall as you walk, letting your fingertips guide you along the smooth stone. In some places you feel faint carvings, shapes that have been softened by time, but still hold hints of what they once were. A small bell, a star, a curved line spiraling inward, and in one spot, your fingers trace the outline of a tiny handprint, child-sized, carved deliberately, placed at knee height. You pause. Your heart does not race. The corridor does not darken. Instead, a warm calm settles over your chest, the kind of warmth that comes from understanding. You are not following the path of something malicious, but something meaningfully connected to Captain Hale. You continue onward. The corridor rounds another gentle curve, and faint light begins to appear ahead. Not moonlight, not firelight, but a pale bluish glow that seems to seep through the air, rather than shine from a single source. You follow it. The corridor widens into a small antechamber, octagonal in shape, its floor covered with smooth stones arranged in deliberate patterns, circles, spirals, and lines intersecting like constellations. At the center sits a wooden box, small, sturdy, lid closed. It looks recently touched. As you approach the box, the bluish glow brightens slightly, filling the chamber with a faint luminescence that reveals details you hadn't noticed. On the walls around you, etched symbols appear, invisible before, but illuminated now by the gentle light. They depict scenes: a tall figure holding a lantern, a child reaching upward toward a rope, the silhouette of the bell tower, a star above it all. Captain Hale enters the antechamber behind you. His presence is soft, barely disturbing the light. The glow reacts to him, not shrinking, not flickering, but stabilizing, settling into gentle pulsing waves. You kneel beside the wooden box. The lid bears a carved shape, a bell, with a small handprint beneath it. You lift the lid. Inside, you find only a few objects. Small, personal, softened by time. A woolen scarf, carefully folded. The fabric is frayed at the ends, but it carries faint traces of color. A muted blue, like the early morning sky. A tiny bell, no larger than a fingertip, attached to a thin leather cord. You lift it gently. The bell does not ring. It emits only the faintest vibration, as though holding the memory of a sound that once comforted someone small. And beneath these, a final object, a thin strip of parchment. You unfold it. The handwriting is uneven, uncertain, clearly done by a very young hand. If you hear me, I will hear you back. You look up. Captain Hale stands near the chamber's edge, his form softened by the pale glow, his posture quiet and steady. He gazes at the objects with an expression that carries the faint echoes of memory, not pain, not longing, but a gentle tenderness that has survived even beyond life. You sense suddenly that these corridors were not built for soldiers, not for strategy, not for defense. They were built as a refuge, a safe place, a small world within the fortress, meant for someone who needed protection, warmth, and gentle guidance, a child who once followed the bell ringer, a child whose footsteps you sensed, a child whose presence still lingers. The bluish glow softens, fading back into the shadows, as you return the items to the box. With quiet care, Captain Hale steps closer. For the first time, he raises a hand toward you, not to touch, but to gesture, a subtle, sweeping motion, toward another narrow corridor, leading deeper into the stone. An unspoken message. There is more to show. You stand. The scent of lavender drifts faintly behind you, carried from the bellringer's chamber, as though his memories travel with you. The forgotten corridor ahead is darker, older, and quieter still, but the air does not feel cold, feels patient, awaiting the next step. You breathe softly, and with Captain Hale at your side, you walk deeper into the heart of Aramore's longest-kept secret, the Chamber of Echoes. The deeper corridor narrows again, its walls tapering inward as if the stone itself leans closer to listen to your steps. The air grows quieter still, not heavier, just more focused, like the hush inside an ancient library, where every whispered sound carries purpose. Captain Hale moves beside you, his presence soft and steady, casting the faintest shimmer across the stone, where moonlight cannot reach. The corridor curves once, twice, each bend revealing nothing but more darkness. Calm, waiting darkness, with no sense of danger, and no trace of fear, only patience. Then the space opens unexpectedly, into a wide, low-ceilinged chamber. You stop at the threshold. The air here hums, not loudly, not sharply, but with a low, resonant vibration, like the tone of a bell, heard from deep beneath the ground. The Chamber of Echoes. You step inside. The floor is smooth, shaped into shallow ripples, like the marks left by slow-moving water. Long, long ago, the walls curve inward slightly, creating a natural amphitheater, where even the softest sound seems to hang in the air, just a fraction longer than it should. This is the oldest place in the fortress, older than the bell tower, older than the halls above, carved from stone, that carries the memory of countless nights and countless footsteps. Captain Hale follows you in, his silhouette merging gently with the soft glow that seems to radiate from the stone itself. At the chamber's center stands a small pedestal. Upon it rests a polished wooden box, slightly larger than the one you found earlier. The box is smooth to the touch, its surface glowing faintly in the gentle light. Carved symbols run along its edges, bells, stars, spirals, and tiny handprints arranged in a ring. You look toward Captain Hale. He stands perfectly still, yet the air around him feels different, charged with quiet meaning, as though this is the place his story has been leading you toward. You lift the lid of the box. Inside lies a folded piece of fabric, soft, thin, worn at the edges. From years of being held tightly, you unfold it. A scarf, small, child-sized, the same muted blue as the woolen piece you found earlier, but lighter, like the color of dawn, reflected in a still pool. The fabric trembles slightly in your hands, catching the gentle hum of the chamber and resonating with it, as though remembering a familiar warmth. Beneath the scarf rests a small wooden bell, carved with delicate care, smoothed by countless touches. No metal within it, just wood, soft, warm, silent. Yet when you tilt it gently, a faint chime hums through the air. Not a sound, a vibration. It spreads across the chamber, in a subtle wave, touching the stone walls, and returning to you as a low, warm echo. Captain Hale closes his eyes, just for a moment, but the gesture is unmistakable. Memory, recognition, and something deeper, a release of long-held silence. You set the bell gently back into the box. A faint breath escapes the chamber, a soft exhale of warmth that brushes your cheek, like a small hand passing by. Then you hear it. Footsteps, light, soft, playful. They echo from the far side of the chamber, barely audible, like a memory stepping back into shape. Tap, tap, tap. Not Captain Hale's. Not yours. The air stirs. A flicker moves along the far wall. Not a shadow, not a shape, just a ripple of light, like a lantern's glow swaying gently in the dark. You turn instinctively, and there, at the chamber's edge, you see a small silhouette, a child, barefoot, head slightly tilted, watching with curiosity, with calmness, with the softness of someone who has waited a very, very long time. The outline is faint, woven from the same pale light that shapes Captain Hale, but the form is clear enough to feel unmistakably real. The child does not speak, does not step forward, simply watches. Captain Hale moves then, slow, careful, with a tenderness that has no fear in it. He kneels, a gesture filled with patience and quiet love. The child's silhouette brightens, as if responding to a familiar motion. You feel the chamber hum deepen, warmer, fuller, as though the fortress itself is acknowledging a reunion. Long delayed, the child steps forward. Tiny footprints appear in the dust, soft, light, evenly spaced, matching the prints you saw in the tower's stairwell. Captain Hale extends a hand, not to grasp, not to pull, but to offer. The child raises a small hand and rests it gently in his. Their forms glow softly together, two dim lights merging. In the stillness of the chamber, the low hum of the room shifts beneath your feet, a deep, warm resonance, like the heart of the bell, beating once, just for them. Captain Hale looks toward you then. His expression, subtle, but profoundly clear, carries gratitude, not for freeing him, not for discovering secrets, but for listening, for witnessing what time had nearly forgotten. He bows his head slightly, a gesture of peace, of closure, of release. The child turns toward the pedestal, placing one small hand upon the wooden bell. The chamber vibrates, softly, deeply, warmly. A single chime drifts through the air, not loud, not sharp, a gentle note that vibrates with the emotion of a memory finally understood. Captain Hale rises slowly, still holding the child's hand. The glow around them intensifies, just enough to make their forms clearer. A tall guardian, a small companion, bound not by sorrow, but by quiet devotion. They turn toward a narrow opening. At the far side of the chamber, a doorway carved into the stone, filled not with darkness, but with a soft, silver light. Captain Hale pauses. He looks back at you. Then the child looks too. Two expressions, one message. Thank you. They step toward the light. As they cross the threshold, the bell tower hums gently overhead, a final, peaceful resonance. The light brightens, glowing like the soft dawn behind a mountain ridge. Their silhouettes fade. The chamber quiets. And then, as if the fortress itself is exhaling for the first time in centuries, the echo settles into a calm, steady silence. You stand alone in the chamber of echoes, bathed in a deep tranquility that feels timeless, complete, and profoundly gentle. The vigil is over, but the peace they leave behind remains, the silent return. For a long while you simply stand in the chamber of echoes, listening to the soft, lingering hum that still vibrates faintly through the stone. It is not quite sound, more like the memory of a sound, a warmth that settles across your shoulders, like a shawl woven from quiet light. The silver glow in the far doorway gradually fades, narrowing into a thin line, and then settling into soft darkness, leaving behind nothing but tranquility, and the steady pulse of stillness that the chamber now seems to breathe. You lower your gaze to the pedestal. The small wooden bell rests exactly where the child left it, its surface faintly luminous, the smooth curve warm to the touch. It no longer hums. It rests, peaceful, complete. You gently refold the scarf and place it back into the wooden box, the familiar scent of lavender rising. As the fabric settles, when the lid closes, the air shifts with a soft exhale, as though the room itself is acknowledging the end of a long-kept vigil. You turn toward the path that brought you here. Captain Hale and the child are gone now, their steps absorbed into the quiet stone. Like the final notes of a lullaby, fading into the night, you walk slowly back through the antechamber. The bluish glow that once illuminated the symbols on the walls has dimmed, but not disappeared. Faint traces remain, like paintings glimpsed in the soft light before dawn. As you pass the recesses in the corridor, the carved handprints seem to warm beneath your fingertips, as though quietly grateful to no longer wait alone. You follow the curve of the corridor. Your footsteps echo gently, not with loneliness, but with the easy cadence of someone walking a path that now understands itself again. When you reach the bellringer's chamber, you pause in the doorway. The room looks different now, not changed, but settled, as though a long-held breath has finally been released, and the air has softened in its wake. The ledger on the table lies open, to a page you didn't leave it on, a blank page, clean and untouched, waiting without expectation. A new beginning, meant not for ink, but for silence. You rest your hand lightly on the table's edge, and feel warmth beneath the wood, the faint residue of a presence that has finally found its peace. The small items on the shelf look gentler, as if a soft light touches them even without the lantern. The child's wooden soldier leans lightly to one side, as though relaxed. The tiny silver ring rests in a perfect circle. The lantern, the one Captain Hale tended so carefully, is warmer now. Its glass reflects the faintest glow, a quiet echo of the vigil once kept by steady hands. You take a slow breath. The tower is no longer watchful. It is resting. You step onto the spiral staircase. The ascent had been cool before, but now the air feels warmer, softer, like the inside of a hearth-lit room. Your footsteps rise through the quiet spaces, with no tapping overhead, and no distant hum, only stillness, peaceful stillness. At the top of the staircase, you emerge into the bell room again. The great bell hangs motionless, but something is different. Its iron surface carries a faint warmth, and the etched symbols look less tired. The spirals deeper, the star shapes clearer, as if released from the weight of waiting. The rope no longer sways. It hangs in perfect stillness, the fibers settling after centuries of gentle, unanswered movement. You approach the bell and rest your palm near the surface. The metal hums, but only faintly, soft enough that you feel it more than hear it, a quiet resonance of completed purpose. You step back and bow your head slightly, a gesture of respect, for the tower, for Captain Hale, for the child, and for the timeless vigil that has now found its end. Leaving the bell room feels different this time. The landing greets you with calm quiet. The wooden door shifts closed behind you. With a soft, effortless sigh, you descend the walkway that overlooks the courtyard. The mist below moves gently, thinning slowly, as though the air itself is clearing old stories. From the stones, halfway along the walkway, you notice the lantern hung on the wall. It glows, softly, steadily, with no flame inside, just warmth. As you pass it, the light brightens for a moment, not enough to startle, just enough to say farewell. You continue down the steps. The courtyard looks calmer now, still, balanced. The circle of earth at its center seems smoother than before, as though many overlapping footprints have finally settled into a single peaceful shape. You cross the courtyard slowly. No footsteps echo behind you. No tapping follows your movement. The fortress feels lighter, its silence no longer weighted by expectation. When you reach the gate, the heavy wooden door opens smoothly, as if guided by an invisible hand that offers one final courtesy. The cool night air outside greets you. The pines whisper softly in the wind, Starlight paints the path. In pale, gentle lines, you step beyond the fortress walls. Behind you, Aramor stands quiet, not brooding, not waiting, but resting. For the first time in centuries, a faint hum drifts over the walls, so subtle you almost miss it. Not a bell, not a voice, something older, something lighter. Peace. You walk down the path, your footsteps calm, your breath steady. The night folds around you, with the softness of a warm blanket. Aramor fades behind you, but the tranquility you carry from the bell tower, that gentle, echoing stillness, remains with you long after the fortress disappears from view. The road home. You step onto the familiar stone path that winds away from Aramor Fortress, and the night greets you with a gentle, cool embrace, the kind that settles across your shoulders like a soft cloak. The air feels lighter now, as if the world itself has quietly exhaled, letting go of a breath it had been holding for too long. Behind you, the fortress stands silent and steady on its high ridge, its towers outlined faintly in silver by the moonlight. But it is no longer a silhouette filled with questions. It is simply a place of calm history, a place that has closed its eyes at last. The path ahead is smooth beneath your boots, the stones warmed slightly from the day's sun, and now cooling gently under the night sky. Pine needles whisper above, their soft, drifting sounds like the quiet turning of pages in a book you once loved and have now finished, with the comforting knowledge that its final chapter ends in peace. You walk slowly. There is no rush now. No need to listen for footsteps or distant tapping. No reason to look over your shoulder. The silence behind you is complete, not empty, but full of rest. The mist that once crept through the courtyard now rises gently from the lower valley, draping the landscape in pale silver. It curls around the edges of the path, never quite touching your feet, as though respectfully giving you room to breathe. Your thoughts drift, soft and unhurried, like leaves carried on a calm stream. You think of Captain Hale, his steady posture, his quiet devotion, his hand extended not out of need, but out of gentle guardianship. You think of the child, a small hand reaching for a rope, a tiny bell carved from wood, a drawing folded carefully into a ledger. The bond between them lingers in the air around you, not as a haunting, but as a warmth, subtle, enduring, and kind. A new breeze touches your cheek, carries no chill, only the faintest scent of lavender, as if a final reminder from the bellringer's chamber has chosen to accompany you on your way. You continue downward. The path widens. Trees thin out. A patch of open hillside appears, covered in soft grass that sways gently with the night wind. Beyond it, the valley stretches in a quiet expanse, its meadows glowing faintly under the moon. You pause halfway down the slope, and turn to look once more at Aramor. From this distance, the fortress looks almost like a memory already, a quiet shape carved into the night sky, its contours softened, its presence no longer weighty or weary. And then, just as you lower your gaze, you see it, a single soft glimmer of light, in the highest window of the bell tower. Not bright, not flickering, just a warm, steady glow, a lantern's glow, the kind that does not call for you, but simply says goodbye. You stand for a moment, letting the light settle gently in your vision, before it fades, slowly, gradually, like a final bow at the end of a long, graceful vigil. When it disappears, you smile, a quiet, inward curve of peace, and turn back toward the valley road. Your footsteps carry you forward with ease, your shoulders lighter, your mind calm. The wind hums low in the grass, echoing the deep resonance of the bell, not as a warning, but as a lullaby, a soothing rhythm that guides your thoughts into softer places. The further you walk, the more the world slows. Stars shimmer overhead like drifting lanterns. Shadows stretch long and gentle across the path, never obscuring it, only softening its edges. Owls call from distant branches, their voices deep and steady, as if joining the night in a shared, restful hymn. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with cool, moonlit air. There is no urgency now. No mystery left unresolved. Everything that needed to be seen has been seen. Everything that needed to be heard has finally been heard. At the base of the hill, the path levels out and becomes a softer trail of earth, its edges lined with low shrubs and small wildflowers that glow pale in the starlight. You walk a little slower now, your steps naturally easing into a relaxed rhythm, a rhythm your mind gently mirrors. Thoughts drift apart, muscles loosen, your breath deepens without effort. The quiet of the valley wraps around you like a blanket. You look up one final time. The fortress is far behind you now, barely visible above the slope, a calm outline against the sky. The bell tower stands silently, holding its peace with dignity, its long vigil finally complete. You turn toward the road ahead. The night is open, wide, gentle. There is a sense of companionship here, not from people, not from voices, but from the night itself. It feels as though the world has recognized what you carried for the bell ringer, and in return, carries you now. The path curves softly toward the horizon, where the first hint of dawn waits patiently beneath the darkness. You walk toward it, your body relaxed, your thoughts quiet, your heart steady. The hours you spent within Aramore Fortress have settled into you like a long, peaceful breath. And as you follow the winding road home, the night whispers around you in tones as gentle as a lullaby. Rest now. The vigil is kept. Nights that follow. In the nights that follow your visit to Aramore, sleep comes more easily than it used to. You notice it first in quiet, simple ways. The restless turning that once kept you awake slows. The weight of old thoughts. The small anxieties that used to circle your mind, as shadows circling a lantern, begin to lose their sharpness. When you close your eyes now, you sometimes see the outline of the bell tower, not looming, not dark, but serene. You remember the quiet way Captain Hale stood beside the rope, the way he watched the bell, not as a weapon, but as a promise. You remember the soft steps of the child in the chamber of echoes, the tiny hand resting trustingly in his. And somewhere between waking and sleep, you feel that same gentle presence, settling into the corners of your thoughts, tidying them, quieting them, like someone slowly dimming lanterns in a hallway, until only the softest glow remains. Some nights, when the wind is just right, you think you hear a distant chime, not clear enough to be real, not loud enough to break the night, just a warm vibration that seems to rise from the earth itself. You know it doesn't come from the towns or churches nearby. It feels older than that, quieter, more patient. You breathe with it. The sound doesn't call you anywhere. It doesn't pull you back to Aramore, or ask you to climb another stair. It simply reminds you that somewhere in the world, there is a bell that has done its work, a captain whose watch has ended, a child who does not wander alone. And because of that, you too are allowed to rest. During the day, the memory of the fortress settles at the back of your mind, like a book returned gently to its shelf. You don't think of it constantly. You don't need to. Simply there, a quiet reassurance that there are places in the world where unfinished stories have found their endings, and the echoes of old footsteps have softened into gentle silence. Sometimes when you pass a hill, or a distant building perched on a ridge, you notice how easily the shapes of towers and walls can fade into the landscape until they become part of the sky itself. You realize then that not every presence is meant to be felt as weight. Some exist merely as quiet anchors, steadily holding a piece of the world in place, so others can move and breathe more freely. At night, when you lie down and let your thoughts drift, you feel that quiet anchor in the way your body relaxes a little more quickly, your shoulders sinking into the mattress, your breath falling into a rhythm that feels almost like the slow, measured sway of a bell at rest. You no longer listen for strange sounds in the dark. You no longer wait for something to appear. Instead, you listen to your own breathing, to the calm pulse of your heart, to the soft rustle of fabric, like distant leaves stirred by a friendly wind. If somewhere in the distance, a floorboard creaks, or a branch taps gently against a window, it no longer feels like an intrusion. It feels like the natural murmur of a world that is still moving, still alive, even while you sleep. Somewhere beyond the hills, Aramore sits in its quiet place, no longer pressing itself against the edge of your awareness. It doesn't need your attention anymore. And that, you realize, is a kind of gift. You turn on your side, close your eyes, and the last image that comes to you is not the fortress itself, but the lantern's glow in the tower window. Soft, steady, content. A light no longer calling for anyone, but simply shining gently, because that is what it was made to do. In that glow, your thoughts finally untangle, and sleep arrives, like a slow, deep bell note, spreading through calm air, not to wake you, but to guide you gently into rest. A story told softly. In time, the memory of Aramore becomes a story you carry inside you, not as a burden, not as a secret, but as a quiet tale you can choose to share whenever the night feels a little too long. For someone you care about, maybe it happens on an evening when a friend tells you they haven't slept well in days, or on a night when someone small asks why the dark feels so big. When the lights go out, you don't tell them everything at once. You begin simply. You tell them about an old fortress on a hill, wrapped in mist and moonlight, where a bell once watched over the hours, so others could rest without fear. You describe a captain who took his duty so seriously that even after his life had passed, his presence remained, only to make sure no one walked the night alone. You introduce the small child with a wooden bell and a hand-drawn picture, someone who trusted the bell ringer completely, someone who knew that as long as the bell stood, no darkness would be entirely empty. You speak softly. Your voice slows. You let quiet linger between sentences, the way it lingered in the stone corridors of Aramore, so that the person listening can fill those spaces with their own breathing, their own calm. You don't emphasize the ghostly part of the story. You don't call it that at all. Instead, you say there was a place where time was kept gently, where echoing halls were not haunted, but cared for, and where, even after everyone else had left, someone stayed behind, just to make sure the silence was never frightening. You describe the bell tower, how the bell did not ring to alarm, but to reassure, how its deep, soft vibration was more like a heartbeat than a shout. You paint the memory of the chamber of echoes in broad, soothing strokes, a room where old sounds went to rest, where forgotten footsteps could finally lie down and no longer retrace the same paths. As you speak, you watch their shoulders lower. You notice their breathing slow, their eyelids grow heavier. There is no need to explain what the fortress symbolizes or why the bell ringer's release matters. The story itself knows how to do the work. It wraps around the listener, the way the mist wrapped around the courtyard. Soft, weightless, gentle. When you describe the final scene, the child's hand in Captain Hale's, the lantern's last glow in the tower window, the quiet path leading away beneath the stars, you let your voice grow even softer, like the last embers of a fire, settling into ash. By the time you say that the fortress at last sleeps, the person beside you is already drifting. Their breaths lengthen. The tension around their eyes smooths. Their hands, once restless, grow still. You look at them for a moment, and you realize something simple and quietly profound. The story of Aramore has become what it was always meant to be. Not a tale of unrest, but a lullaby. Not a haunting, but a soft reminder that somewhere, in memory, in myth, in whatever place old stories go to rest, there are watchful presences who once kept the long hours of the night so that others might one day sleep more easily. You turn off the light or lower it to a faint glow. Outside, the wind moves gently through the trees, carrying whispers that sound almost like distant chimes. If you listen just long enough, you lie back, close your own eyes, and allow the calm that you've just given to someone else to fold back over you as well. In the quiet that follows, there is no bell to ring, no tower to climb, no corridor to search. There is only the soft, steady rhythm of breathing, and the deep, easy darkness of a night that holds no demands. Somewhere in that darkness, far beyond the hills and the roads and the waking world, a fortress rests in perfect stillness. The bell ringer sleeps, the child sleeps, the echoes sleep, and now, gently, without effort, without fear, so do you.